The Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs will come to order. Welcome, everyone. Without objection, Representative Neil Dunn of Florida is waived onto the subcommittee for the purpose of questioning witnesses at today's hearing. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I'm going to recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. Good morning and welcome to the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs hearing on strengthening the fleet, challenges and solutions to the naval surface ship construction. Today we are examining the U.S. Navy shipbuilding programs, America's shipyards, naval competition with China and Russia, and the future architecture of the fleet. I represent the 6th District of Wisconsin, and Wisconsinites have had a long, proud history of providing high-quality vessels to the U.S. Navy and the world, as do other districts represented on the subcommittee. By the way, we'll add something here. I don't know if the staff knows. We used to make submarines in Manitowoc, Wisconsin during World War II. I want to thank both of our witnesses here today to testify on behalf of the Navy. As of April 2023, the Navy included 296 battle force ships. Since 2003, the number of ships in the fleet has varied between 270 and 300. The fiscal year 2018 Defense Authorization Act established requirements for a 355-ship Navy. In 2020, the then acting Secretary of the Navy testified to the House Armed Services Committee that achieving the 355-ship Navy would cost another $120 to $130 billion over the next 10 years. Yet naval leadership has signaled that 355 ships are not enough. In February of 2022, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Michael Gilday, stated that he believed the Navy needed a fleet of over 500 ships to meet the commitments outlined in President Biden's National Defense Strategy. So let's understand this. The 2018 NDAA required a 355-ship Navy. We still don't even have 300 ships. It's going to cost at least another $120 to $130 billion to get to 355, but the Biden administration wants over 500 ships. It does not look like the Biden administration is balancing cost, efficiency, or even practical goals when creating the national defense strategy, and the administration is creating these unrealistic goals at a time when military recruitment and retention is at one of its lowest points. Additionally, CNO Gilday stated in August of 2022 that the biggest barrier to adding more ships to the Navy is the industrial base capacity. There have been numerous reports on issues related to ship design flaws, fraudulent contracting practices, and delays due to supply chain issues made worse by the pandemic. Poor design, unrealistic timeliness, and labor recruitment issues, these are the barriers to a more modern and efficient Navy than we hope to explore today. Cost overruns and delays have plagued several programs of high importance. For example, the Zumwalt-class destroyers have cost the U.S. taxpayer around $22.4 billion in research and development alone. The Navy has also struggled to produce a coherent 30-year shipbuilding strategy. This strategy is necessary to enable Congress to effectively fund future programs and create stability within the defense industrial base. While the Navy continues to encounter delays between 2015 and 2022, China surpasses the U.S. Navy in size and is expected to grow to 400 operational ships by 2025. The U.S. Navy is and must continue to remain the greatest the world has ever seen. Its firepower and professionalism are unmatched. By focusing on modernization and future technologies, the U.S. can remain unmatched. I hope to hear from our witnesses today about the ways that Congress can cut the bureaucratic red tape and unleash American manufacturing and ingenuity to meet the threats of the future. Thank you again for each of our witnesses for participating, and I look forward to your testimony. I would now like to recognize Ranking Member Garcia for the purpose of making his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses and thank you so much for your service to our country. We all know that maritime security is critical for us as a nation. The security of our supply chains and our allies across the Pacific is incredibly important, and certainly the Biden-Harris administration is focused on those goals. I want to also commend the Biden administration for reaching a historic AUKUS agreement with Australia and the UK that will provide Australia with submarine technology which will bolster security in the Indo-Pacific region. In my district back in Long Beach, California, it's actually a historic Navy town. It was home to the Navy's first 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Lexington and Saratoga, and most of the Long Beach economy just a generation ago was really driven and was really developed through the Navy infrastructure and through all the amazing jobs that were across the region. Shipbuilding, of course, was once a huge industry here in the United States, but we also know it's long been in decline. 40,000 shipbuilding jobs were lost just under President Reagan, and the Long Beach shipyards actually closed in the 1990s, which caused a major economic blow to our local economy, but also to the economy of places across the West and the country. Now, I fully understand the importance of shipbuilding to communities all around the country. Long Beach has had to work hard to rebuild and reimagine itself after, of course, losing the Navy as its main source of economic driver and jobs. But that's transitioned to a port economy. The Port of Long Beach now handles trade valued at over $200 billion annually and supports over 2 million jobs across the United States in our supply chain. Now, this would not be possible without the freedom of navigation guaranteed, of course, by the United States Navy. Now, you can, of course, slice and dice numbers all you want compared to China or any other country, but I think the evidence is clear. We do have a strong Navy in the United States, and whether you look at the size of vessels, the number, experience, the quality of our service members, the number and quality of our aircraft carriers and advanced submarines, and even the number of missiles, the Navy is the most powerful in the world. No one in the world can do what you gentlemen do and what our Navy does. Now, we're facing new challenges in the 21st century, and the fast-moving technological environment creates real uncertainty for us. It's critical that we work across the aisle, and I look forward to doing so in this subcommittee with the administration and all of you to ensure we have the absolute best in innovation, manpower, and industrial base to keep us at pace. Now, the Biden-Harris administration is working to craft a plan to meet evolving military force needs and to adapt to emerging threats. Congress should be a constructive partner in planning and to give domestic producers more certainty in our shipbuilding plans. But it's also critical to note that we can't just, of course, throw money at the problem. There's a lot of ways of solving this challenge. And we can't reflexively count the number of vessels in our fleet or the number of dollars we devote to defense as measures alone. We should make sure that our investments deliver the security and the capabilities that we need. We need to also make choices about our priorities. We must support policies that rebuild our industrial base and our workforce. The real source of our power, of course, is also our economic strength, our industrial base, our moral leadership, and our allies and partners. We have learned hard lessons in the last few years, particularly in the war in Ukraine and the COVID-era supply chain disruptions that have emphasized so much in lessons learned for us here in our country. We can and should secure those supply chains while creating and protecting good union jobs. Investments like the CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, all have contributed directly to security and, of course, in investing in American jobs. We've rebuilt our industrial base, we've promoted a secure, clean energy future for our supply chain, and ensured economic prosperity for so many more Americans. And as the saying goes, which we all know, and I think is appropriate for this hearing, a rising tide raises all boats. Now, I'm glad we're having this hearing today, and I also want to briefly discuss another issue that's really important for us, for the American shipbuilding industry and our security, and that's our merchant marine fleet. In a crisis, American civilian vessels will be critical to supplying our allies and partners and our military. I understand that the Marine Corps is deepening its partnership with our merchant marine, which is really encouraging for us. Now, Congress can and should do more to support merchant marine shipbuilding, along with our ports and our supply chains. And Mr. Chairman, I hope to work with you on this critical issue. Finally, I want to stress an important point. No conflict is ever inevitable, and I want to warn this committee again against reckless or overheated rhetoric. Our goal, standing shoulder to shoulder with our allies, is to have the best possible Navy and cooperation in the world. With that, again, thank you both for being here and for your service. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I'm pleased to introduce our witnesses today. Our first witness is Rear Admiral Thomas Anderson. He's the Program Executive Officer for Ships for the United States Navy, a position he's held since 2020. As PEO for Ships, Anderson's been responsible for the acquisition of surface combatants for the Navy. Prior to his current assignment, Anderson was the Program Director for the Littoral Combat Ship Program and was the Commander of the Naval Surface Warfare Center. Our second witness is Rear Admiral Casey Moton. He's the Program Executive Officer for Unmanned and Small Combatants for the United States Navy, a position he's held since 2019. As PEO for Unmanned and Small Combatants, Moton is responsible for the acquisition of unmanned maritime systems and small surface combatants. I look forward to hearing from both of you today on these very important issues facing U.S. naval shipbuilding. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record show the witnesses all answered in the affirmative. Thank you. We appreciate all you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witnesses that we've read your written statements and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Please do what you can to limit your oral statements to as close to 5 minutes as possible. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will become yellow, and when the red light comes on, your 5 minutes are up. Though I'm not a stickler on that. I recognize Admiral Anderson to please begin his opening statements.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to address the state of naval surface ship construction. Make no mistake, the U.S. Navy fields the most capable warships on the planet. Platforms like the Virginia-class submarine, Ford-class aircraft carrier, Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, and amphibious assault ship, America-class, are unmatched in their contribution to the high-end fight. The U.S. shipyards which produce and maintain these exceptional ships can be broken down into two categories: repair shipyards and new construction shipyards. Currently, there are 7 what we call Tier 1 new construction shipyards in the United States. These large, heavily facilitized shipyards build the vast majority of the U.S. Navy's capital ships. 5 of these shipyards, Bath Iron Works in Maine, Marinette Marine in Wisconsin, Austell USA in Alabama, Huntington Ingalls in Mississippi, and NASCO in California, build conventionally powered ships. The ships built in these shipyards are the ones that fall underneath Admiral Moton and my portfolios. There are 2 other Tier 1 shipyards, Electric Boat in Connecticut and Newport News in Virginia, and they build nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and submarines. The highest priority and greatest challenge resides in our nuclear shipyards and their associated supply chains as they look to ramp up submarine production to 2 Virginia-class submarines and 1 Columbia-class submarine annually. On the topic of China, I understand the Navy has offered to provide a future classified briefing on China's shipbuilding capacity. But for our discussion today, it is important to understand a major difference between Chinese and U.S. shipbuilding industrial bases. The difference being that China benefits from a massive commercial shipbuilding workload. It leverages the associated workforce, infrastructure, and supply chain in the construction of its naval vessels. A First Marine International 2022 benchmarking study reports that China accounts for 47% of the world's commercial vessel shipbuilding volume. Behind them are our partners in South Korea and Japan at 25% and 16% respectively. And the U.S. is much further down the list. Less than 1% resides in the U.S. commercial shipbuilding industry. This means that unlike countries which heavily leverage commercial investments, the U.S. government largely goes it alone, bearing all the costs of the ships and the associated infrastructure. For perspective, today in our 7 Tier 1 shipyards, there is no commercial shipbuilding work. Clearly, China's commercial shipbuilding industry provides them a massive advantage when it comes to shipbuilding capacity. Despite this gap in commercial shipbuilding scale, there are over 42,000 tradespeople, 66,000 employees in the Navy Tier 1 shipyards, and over 5,000 primary suppliers spending themselves in the worthy cause of building world-class ships for the U.S. Navy every day. Within the next few months, we will deliver, amongst other things, the Navy's first Flight III destroyer. DDG-125, the 75th ship of the Arleigh Burke class, with its upgraded combat system, will provide the ability for one ship to perform both anti-air warfare and ballistic missile defense missions with improved performance via the world's newest and most capable surface radar. To keep deliveries of capital ships like these on time going forward, we, along with our shipyards, are focused on attracting and retaining the necessary workforce and improving resiliency in our supply chain. The President's fiscal year 24 budget has provisions that aid in addressing those concerns, as well as procuring the ships necessary to maintain our surface ship industrial base in a way that achieves our operational needs. I'll end my comments with some perspective on the scale and complexity of what we do. One of the ships that we are currently building in Pascagoula, Mississippi, is the future America-class amphibious assault ship USS Bougainville LHA-8. For perspective, the ship is 104 feet longer than the U.S. Capitol building is wide. Now imagine taking that structure, that size, and making it float. Then making it capable of propelling and steering itself at speeds of 25 miles per hour. Then adding all the services required to make it a home to 2,800 people to live on it at sea. Berthing spaces, water, sewage, heat, air conditioning, dining facilities, computer and servers, food storage and refrigeration, laundry, the list goes on. Encompassing over 150 miles of pipe and over 1,000 miles of cable. Then add to it a full hospital for humanitarian efforts or wartime support to injured Marines. Add to it a fire department and installed firefighting and damage control systems. Then add to it radars, communication gear, and self-defense systems. Then add to it an airport the size of almost 2 football fields capable of supporting 20 Joint Strike Fighters and interoperability with other nations. And build it in a way that allows it to operate at sea in all conditions for deployments lasting at least 6 months and reliably over a 40-year service life. The ships we design, build, and deliver are some of the most complex system machines in existence. We in the acquisition community do not shy away from the challenges of delivering such capability. We actually embrace them because we know the importance of these ships to our Navy and ultimately to our nation's defense. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to your questions.
Admiral Moton.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the state of naval surface ship construction alongside my partner in this effort, Rear Admiral Anderson. I am honored to lead the sailors and Department of the Navy civilians of the Program Executive Office Unmanned and Small Combatants in our mission of acquiring and sustaining the ships and systems required by our Navy and Marine Corps. Our small combatant ship construction programs, including the Constellation-class frigate now under construction, provide important capability for the nation. My team is also developing and building the Navy's nascent fleet of unmanned surface and undersea systems, including their autonomy and enabling technologies. These unmanned vessels, teamed with manned ships, will form the hybrid fleet that the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Gilday, has set as the Navy's objective. In addition to our ship construction work, my command is also responsible for acquisition of systems for mine warfare, expeditionary missions, and special warfare. Our shipbuilding efforts are smaller in magnitude than those conducted by Admiral Anderson's program offices, but are nevertheless important to both the Navy and industry. Our two organizations work in close coordination with each other and with the Navy's other shipbuilding programs to jointly manage the Naval Shipbuilding Industrial Base. We also work closely with industry on matters fostering the efficient execution of shipbuilding, such as workforce development, strengthening of the supply chain, and infrastructure. Certainly the same factors regarding the overall state of our ship construction capacity that Admiral Anderson discussed also apply to our small combatant efforts. In addition to our Navy efforts, I also appreciate the support of Congress in these matters, and particularly thank Congress for the funds it appropriated in fiscal year 2023 to help foster the frigate industrial base and workforce development. Equally foundational to efficient shipbuilding is stable acquisition of modern and mature designs. The Navy has worked hard in applying lessons learned to the Constellation-class program. To reduce technical risk and to develop this new class faster, the Navy worked closely with industry to set the conditions for a successful program of record by developing realistic requirements, utilizing non-developmental systems, and leveraging existing frigate designs, enhanced with U.S. Navy combat and communication systems. Construction is underway in Marinette, Wisconsin on the future USS Constellation, the first-in-class ship. With the emergence of unmanned surface and undersea systems, the Navy is positioned to catalyze a broader segment of the nation's industrial base, including many companies that are not currently associated with defense. Alongside our shipyards producing smaller ships and craft, these other companies include both small businesses and larger firms that specialize in developing technologies such as reliable autonomous systems, artificial intelligence, energy storage, and cyber defense. We have engaged early with industry and, for example, recently completed a comprehensive Department of the Navy Unmanned Systems Industry Day, which was attended by 430 companies, with almost 50% of those being small businesses. These companies, plus academia and other institutions in partnership with the Navy, will enable our goal of the hybrid fleet, with potentially 150 unmanned vessels by 2045. The Navy is taking a deliberate approach to mature the required technologies, utilizing land-based testing and at-sea prototyping, while also operationalizing unmanned capabilities in the fleet. This data and knowledge is informing our large unmanned surface vessel program, which the Navy intends to procure in fiscal year 2025, but it will also enable future fielding of other unmanned vessels. We are using a solve once and scale approach, and while the size of unmanned systems are smaller, there will also be similar challenges and opportunities as in the broader industrial base while we achieve this scale. We will continue working closely with industry and with Navy partners to prepare for this significant acquisition effort to achieve our hybrid fleet. I thank the subcommittee for your time and support and interest in Navy ship construction, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Now I'll recognize myself for the purpose of asking a couple questions. We're going to start with Admiral Anderson. In February, the Navy awarded a $2 billion contract to Lockheed Martin to develop a hypersonic missile system for the Zumwalt-class destroyers. The Zumwalt-class destroyers have seen plenty of overruns, and only 3 have been built out of an original plan to build 32. Now that these 3 ships are stuck in testing and not deployed, how will this new contract with Lockheed Martin help develop the Zumwalt destroyers, and what do you believe went wrong in the acquisition and construction of the ship?
Yes, sir. Thanks for the question. I'll talk a little bit about lessons learned from the construction of the ship first, and then I'll talk about where we're headed with regards to her capability going forward, if that's okay. So I would say that one of the lessons learned we've had from the Zumwalt program is how much technology to attempt to insert in a ship at one given time. The Zumwalt class was going to be revolutionary in the technologies that we implemented in that ship. 12 new technologies all coming together in one ship is a significant amount of risk. And much of that risk was realized through the program. Costs for those ships went up, and ultimately the Navy made the determination that we were not going to buy the 32 that were originally envisioned. We were going to neck that down to 3 and go back to building DDG-51s. So we're now talking about what our next large surface combatant will be after the DDG-51 program. Currently it's titled DDG-X. We've been very mindful to take the lessons learned from the DDG-1000 program. We're not looking to have 12 new technologies in our new large surface combatant. We're really largely looking to change from a revolutionary approach to an evolutionary approach. The 2 major changes that we currently envision in that ship are a change in hull form and a change to integrated propulsion systems. Integration propulsion systems exist in the Navy other places, but they're not in our large surface combatant DDG-51. We're also working very closely with our shipyards to make sure they're involved early on. So we're getting their perspective on the cost, we're getting their perspective on producibility, so we can build that DDG-X efficiently. To your second question on CPS, so we currently have 2 ships that are out in operation. DDG-1000 is already employed. She's already gone forward. DDG-1001 is wrapping up her new construction process. She's already a ship available to the fleet. We have 1 ship left to complete their combat systems on. And the Navy made the determination that we were going to install conventional prompt strike in that ship. Conventional prompt strike is a game-changing technology with regards to hypersonic capability. It is a real game changer with regards to our position with regards to China and their capability. CPS will be fielded in DDG-1000 starting in 2025, so we're moving very quickly to get this capability installed. The other thing that I would share with you is that we do have 2 program offices working this. We're working to mature CPS, the missile itself, through SSP, strategic programs, and then my office is responsible for actually getting it installed in the ship.
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
The original plan was 32. If you were testifying 8 years ago today, how many ships do you think we'd have done by now? Would you have guessed at that time?
Well, I think we made the determination, around that time that we were going to decrease the numbers. That determination for 3 ships was made was many years ago, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I guess for either one of you, it's been reported China has surpassed U.S. when it comes to shipbuilding and today has 340 modern capable ships, whereas the U.S. stands at 296. Will they have more numbers? Should we be more concerned with quality or quantity?
I think the answer on concern is quantity and quality. We should be concerned with both. I think if we take advantage of the ONI brief, they will give you more detail on the capability they have in their ships today. What I would share with you is that
does China sell a lot of ships to other countries?
yes, sir, they do. They sell ships and submarines in addition to commercial ships, as do South Korea and other countries.
Do we ever compete with them for business?
Currently, I think we're limited in our ship foreign military sales of ships to Saudi, which Admiral Moton administers that program, and then AUKUS, as we heard earlier, submarine construction is where we're having discussions today. But we don't have a large volume of ships that we're outsourcing in new construction to foreign countries.
Is that a mistake?
It would be wonderful to be in a position, I go back to this early discussion about capacity in China.
Okay.
It would be wonderful to be in a position where we had the industrial base that was competitive with other countries.
We're not competitive. Okay. Ranking Member Garcia.
Thank you very much. And I was going to just go off of what the chairman was just discussing. I think the shipbuilding disparity is real. I mean, certainly our Navy is the strongest in the world, and we're proud of that. But the disparity is decades and decades in the making. And I think it's important to note that one of the real issues is that China produces about 1,000 commercial cargo vessels per year. And that's on the commercial side. And so the commercial capacity that China then exports to countries across the world, and we see these ships, by the way, you go to any port along the Pacific, whether it's my port in Long Beach and Los Angeles, or it's the ports of Seattle, or anywhere else, even down through Mexico, or ports that go onto other parts of the world across Asia, and most of the ships in the world are actually built by China. And so I think it's important to note that what the shipbuilding does is it provides China with a capacity to then actually streamline their shipbuilding on the military side. And because the United States over many decades has decreased their focus on shipbuilding as an economy, that has allowed China, over the last 40, 50 years to be the world's producer essentially of cargo ships on the commercial side. And I will note, having had the Port of Long Beach as mayor in the city, that, in my opinion, Chinese commercial ships are of less quality and less kind of climate or less focused on climate and some of the other goals as ships that might be produced, for example, in Korea and other places across the world, or the work that we're doing in the U.S. I just want to note real quick for both the admirals, what's the current maximum capacity for military shipbuilding in the U.S.?
Sir, we're engineers on this side of the table, so we're currently calculating how to best.
I mean, is around 10? Is that sound right? Sound about right?
Yeah, if you look at the surface shipbuilding budgets, routinely we're somewhere in the vicinity of 7 to 9 ships requested per year.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Which is a good indication.
Sir, it's certainly, it's also has to be kind of a yard-by-yard answer, our nuclear shipyard capability, large amphibious ships, right? So it's a rough range, but certainly, you kind of have to look class by class as well.
I think that sounds right. And what do you think are the most important steps that Congress could take to actually build shipping capacity?
So, as I mentioned, our fiscal year 24 budget has the quantity of ships we need, we believe we need operationally and to maintain the industrial base. There's also funding in there that helps us to expand the workforce. One of the real challenges we have in this country is availability of blue-collar labor. And we saw that as a challenge as we were in COVID and came out of COVID, and we continue to struggle to identify talent to come in, people who are interested in the blue-collar trades. So support of our budget requests that provide funding to develop the workforce. That comes in 2 ways. The submarine industrial base, which I mentioned earlier, has targeted funds to help advance the workforce. Additionally, last year in the NDAA, Section 122 provided a requirement for the Navy when awarding shipbuilding contracts in the future to fund a percentage of the overall cost of the ship to go towards workforce development items. Those are helpful.
Sir, if I might add.
Yeah, briefly, yes, sir.
I mean, first of all, your points about China's capacity are certainly correct, as Admiral Anderson discussed. The U.S. Navy's approach is to focus on not just the capacity, but also the capability and the readiness. And so that's the way we're approaching it. From what can we do to help, certainly anything that we can do to strengthen our industrial base to meet our current demand and to surge if we need that to happen. The Navy tries to do stable planning, efficient acquisition. That's why we ask for things like multi-year procurements in certain programs, Congress's support of those. For example, and just to reiterate Admiral Anderson's, to invigorate shipbuilding as a profession in the United States.
Absolutely.
With young people.
And let me just, to wrap up, just how many times almost up here, and I agree completely with both of you, and I just want to remind the committee that, that there is synergy between the commercial side of shipbuilding and what we're able to do on the military side. And because the United States for the last generation has essentially withdrawn from shipbuilding as a major source of manufacturing jobs, that does impact, while of course China has ramped up those efforts. So I want to thank you both for your answers.
Congressman Dunn. I'm sorry. Congressman Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Anderson, Admiral Moton, thank you for being here today. Admiral Moton, sir, we have a high level of confidence in your leadership and as you guide the MUSV program, a critical shipbuilding program for our nation. And I just want to personally reassure you that my office stands aligned with your vision for completion, and we stand with our with the primary contractor and the subcontracted shipbuilders. We avail ourselves to you and your office and your staff, so we look forward to moving the project forward. And we have had meaningful engagement with your staff and your office regarding that program. So thank you for your accessibility and your interaction with my office regarding the MUSV program. We shall find a path forward there. Admiral Anderson, I have a lot to unpack here and a few minutes to do it in. Thank you, sir, for your service to your country. And although I have many questions to get you said something that was just striking earlier. You said it would be wonderful if we had the industrial base in America. You were being asked about our competitive shipbuilding capabilities as compared to China. What exactly do you mean by that, sir? We've been building vessels in America for a very long time, and quite successfully. The quality of our shipbuilding, I believe, in America is second to none. And it's a communist-run country over there. There's slave labor and no environmental regulations, no safety standards. What exactly do you mean you wish we had the industrial base in America that they do in China?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Just to be clear, the point I made was that the commercial work that China has provides opportunity to them with regards to their military production. It's not to in any way impugn U.S. workforce, the quality. Actually, I think in my opening remarks I was pretty clear on that we deliver the finest warships on the planet.
Isn't the
advantage,
the cornerstone of our nation's military, the moral integrity upon which we stand? Is it an opportunity for a Chinese family to provide slave labor in the shipbuilding industry in China?
No, sir. Maybe to explain the point a little bit better, I'll talk to South Korea. So I recently visited South Korea. South Korea has a similar...
Okay, South Korea, the only reason South Korea is free is because of America.
Yes, sir.
So I don't want to get into the weeds on that. That was just a striking statement. Let me say, for the record, I believe that our shipbuilding industry in America is the strongest in the world, and our industrial skill and the quality of the products we produce in America is second to none. And I think that shipbuilders and welders and fitters and fabricators and machinists across the country would agree with that. Chairman, I'd like to unanimous consent to enter to the record a letter addressed to Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security and Secretary Del Toro of the United States Navy, dated September 30th, 2022, from my office and signed by myself and Congressman Neil Dunn, and the corresponding responsive letters from the Navy, October 28th, and from Department of Homeland Security on November 14th. I'd like to enter them to the record, sir.
So ordered.
Admiral Anderson, wow, 5 minutes rolls by very quickly here. I'm going to ask you one question. Does the Navy have the authority to reallocate awarded contracts from one shipyard to another to preserve industrial capabilities?
The Navy has the authority to act on individual contracts and to make determinations on the use of dual source for shipbuilding platforms.
So if the chairman will indulge to complete this question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. It's come to my office's attention that the law cited by you and your office, sir, regarding moving ships from a smaller shipyard to a larger shipyard was your 10 U.S. Code 2304 C Charlie 3, which states that it's necessary to award the contract to a particular source or sources in order to maintain a facility, producer, manufacturer, or other supplier. So that law makes sense, but how would this law give your office the authority to move shipbuilding from a contract at a smaller shipyard, building steel vessels, and sole source award those ships to a shipbuilder, a large shipbuilder that had never built a steel vessel? How is that maintaining an asset?
So not to delve too far into the details, the justification for that is signed out by the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. In other words, that authority does not reside with me. That's the Navy's authority.
That's the authority you cited, though. That's the law that you cited,
That's the
correct?
law that in the memo signed by RDA was utilized.
Do you agree with that citation of law?
I do.
Okay, my time has expired. I'll have questions to submit in writing to both admirals. Deepest respect for you both as we forge a path forward for our shipbuilding in America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your.
Thank you, Congressman Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Anderson, Admiral Moton, thank you very much for your willingness to come before the committee and help us with our work. Just a little bit of background here. I'm a former ship fitter. I worked at the General Dynamics shipyard in Quincy, Massachusetts before coming to Congress. I share Mr. Higgins' frustration sometimes with the bidding process, and I just want to emphasize that I am worried about the workforce situation here and the number of shipyards and the number of dry docks that we have across the country. And I worry about our national security if we ever had to rely on an enhanced shipbuilding program or a enhanced repair program with the number of dry docks we have. And I just want to say on the record that it's important that you spread the work out. And Mr. Higgins was talking about, moving work from a small shipyard to a bigger shipyard that has a lot of work but doesn't necessarily have the same expertise. You're going to put those smaller shipbuilding facilities and ship repair facilities out of business. I've got a little. I was very involved with Boston Ship Repair. It's right outside my office, and we can fit most ships in there except for the largest carriers, and we've put 17 bids in the past couple of years, and we got one successful bid, and so I've traveled around a bit as an iron worker as well. I worked in Norco, Louisiana. I know what they're doing down in Avondale. I know that we've got some other bigger shipyards and repair facilities. But it's important if you're going to put a bid out there, you want to have a lot of competition to try to get that number down. And if you whittle it down to just a few shipyards, you're going to pay more. You're going to put our workforce at risk, and you're going to close down a lot of these smaller shipyards. So I just ask you to be mindful of that. The other, on a personal note, I got a buddy of mine, Thomas G. Kelly, who's he's a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, and we were lucky enough in the 2023 budget to put in some money to have a DGG 140 named after him. And I just want to, it's in construction, it's just beginning right now, so it's going to be a few years. But I just want to put it on the record. I'm going to write to Secretary Del Toro that I would like to have that christened in our home port of South Boston and not anywhere else. Tom's, he's a dearly loved member of our community, and I think it would do him proud to have that ship dedicated in our home port. And I think it'd be a fitting crowning achievement of his career and wonderful recognition of his service. I am concerned about how we post up against China. And I guess the question is, and I've seen their shipbuilding program, and I'm not talking about quality, but I am talking about the number of vessels. I think they've got a program I think they're doing 340 right now. They can put 340 ships or platforms anyway, and we're at about 290 or something like that. So it seems to be if we stay on the current path, we are going to fall further behind. And what is it that you would recommend for us to do the changes that we need to make to catch up, given our limitations on supply chain and the current pace at which we're turning out ships. Admiral Anderson?
Sir, I think there's two pieces to it. The first piece is the discussion about our capability versus their capability, the quality of their capability, their ability actually to project power with that capability. One of the things that we have is that's absolutely a strategic strength for us are the sailors that operate our ships, their proficiency at operating ships around the world, the technology that we have within our ships. One of our major areas of advantage is our submarines. I go back to that initial discussion that says our submarine force absolutely needs to ramp up. We're currently delivering somewhere less than 1.5 Virginia-class submarines per year. We need to ramp the workforce to do that to 2 Virginia-class and 1 Columbia-class. Estimates of that program office is that that will take somewhere between 80 and 100,000 tradespeople to be hired over the next 10 years. Wow. It's significant.
Yeah.
So when you look at the Navy budget where we're focused in making that happen. I go back to this supplier industrial base funds that we're using to get people interested in blue-collar labor, get them married up with companies that support that supply chain. So while I'm not being overly vocal in the portfolio that we work in with regards to additional need, submarine industrial base is really where we need efforts.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just...
Sure, we'll give you another
10
question.
more seconds. I just want you to think about, look, I'm a union iron worker, and I'm also a member of a shipfitters union. We have the apprentice program and it's a 4-year program. We train these kids coming in, these young men and women. There's a pathway there to get that workforce trained up and put them to work. But you got to work with us. The Navy has to work with us. Thank you for your courtesy, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I yield back.
Thank you. Congressman Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the spirit of which the last 2 members of this body have asked questions. So my opening statement, the Department of Defense and the Navy are in a bad way. The Department of Defense is the only agency since 2013 that has never passed a financial audit. Last year, DOD failed its 5th consecutive audit. A staggering 61% of DOD funds were unaccounted for. The Government Accountability Office, gentlemen, are you familiar with that office? Both of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The Government Accountability Office estimates that the DOD has no idea where millions of dollars worth of valuable equipment is. The last time DOD even bothered to compile the amount of the DOD equipment in the hands of federal contractors was 2014. In the last few years, China has surpassed the United States of America for the first time in numbers of warships. By 2025, as has been reiterated here, China's fleet is expected to grow to 400 ships, 60 more than the U.S. Navy's current fleet. Instead of a focus on a more lethal, efficient, and deadly fighting force, the Navy instead seeks to appease the woke. Just a year ago, 240 servicemen were discharged from the Navy for refusing the experimental vaccine. That is a national disgrace. They ought to be brought back in and given back pay. The Navy even named, when talking about the U.S. Reagan, the former president's got to be rolling in his grave. Now, admirals, how has the endless wars in the Middle East and now Ukraine affected the Navy's military readiness?
Sir, if I could start just, your initial comments, just to assure you, the department is certainly committed to completing successfully the audit, and certainly at Admiral Anderson's eye level in shipbuilding, we understand the importance of transparency at the level that we manage, making sure that our contractors are following contract requirements in terms of compliance, business systems.
Oh, I get that, but I mean, to the 2 gentlemen that preceded me with questions, you have to know where money is in order to get money out.
Yes, sir. And
and it's a disgrace that there is no audit. I can't tell you how that is disgraceful.
Yes, sir. And at our level, we are completely committed to that. I know the Navy is as well. In terms of the readiness, again, I would just offer, again, Admiral Anderson's role is to build the shipbuilding program that the Navy determines. So in terms of shipbuilding, we've probably kept a fairly steady rate, I would say, of shipbuilding, even during the conflicts. We certainly had our missions we had to prepare. Shipbuilding's a long game, as we like to say. It takes multiple years. So we certainly have a lot of challenges with our industrial base and our future capacity. But kind of your question about tying that back to the wars, I think we're focused on our capability through the future, and we're committed to providing that capability.
So let's get back to the Government Accountability Office. As you know, it's an independent agency that provides policy recommendations to executive agencies through an extensive research and coordination with government officials. Do either one of you know how many priority recommendations from the GAO has the Navy that are still remaining unaddressed?
Sir, I don't think either of us know that. I certainly could speak to our specific.
Well, the
program,
answer is 17. There are entire agencies that don't have higher numbers than that. For contrast, Air Force and Army only have 3 unaddressed priority recommendations. Could you please explain why the Navy is falling so far behind its peers? I mean, the questions here are geared toward the readiness of this fighting force, and something's wrong here.
So I think with our level in shipbuilding, we probably can't give you that whole picture for the Navy, but we could certainly provide a response on the priority actions you mentioned and where we are with closing those.
I would definitely demand that we get that, because we can't do our job without you doing your job first. Here's another thing. Out of the 17 recommendations, you're not aware of how many you're actually addressing, are you?
Sorry, Admiral Anderson and I are not, because we are focused on the recommendations relevant to our shipbuilding efforts. But certainly at the Navy level, I'm confident we're aware and we can get you that information.
Well, do you see our frustration?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we'd like to get that back in writing, and I share the frustration with my colleagues on the Hill. We got to do better. I yield back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Congressman Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Begilday recently testified to Congress that the biggest barrier to adding more Navy ships is industrial-based capacity at American shipyards. There's more work to be done on ship maintenance and production than can be done within the facilities currently available. Our Navy has been engaging in this strategic outsourcing by partnering with smaller and larger shipyards to assemble ships, but it's not necessarily clear that having defense contractors take on so much of this work is sustainable in the long term. But what's clear is that something needs to be done to meet our national security needs. Admiral Anderson, how do the cost and production cycle times of shipbuilding that's associated with strategic outsourcing compare to those associated with public shipyards?
When you talk about strategic outsourcing, comparing to public shipyards, you're predominantly talking about submarine work, and unfortunately, I don't have the details related to submarines. We certainly can take that for the record and get back to you.
Okay, thank you. And what can the Navy do to ensure that shipyards work together to establish an adequate flow of materials and maximize production?
There's quite a bit of that takes place naturally. The Navy is aware of it. There is a shipbuilding ecosystem. There are professional organizations where the shipyards get together and talk about their relative needs and partnering. The Shipbuilders Council of America is an example where that forum exists. There's naturally competition between the shipyards, so it's not completely as transparent as one might like, but there absolutely are examples where shipyards are partnering together not only on core shipbuilding work, but work with their supply chains. There's also companies that have multiple shipyards, so I'll point to GD NASCO and BIW, who certainly leverage each other's supply chains in the construction of ships, and the same thing with Huntington Ingalls and Casey, I don't know if you have.
And I would just add quickly that, of course, at the Navy level, we watch the entire shipbuilding industrial base and certainly look for the factors that you're talking about, Congressman. The shipbuilders also cooperate. There's organizations where shipbuilders get together and the suppliers get together, and there's some collaboration there. We have activities where we do research and development on shipbuilding and improving the industrial base. So it is a balance between the shipyards obviously want to be competitive with one another, and we want competition, but at the same time, we want a strong industrial base that's going to support both our production work and our repair and modernization work, like you mentioned, at the public shipyards.
Thank you. Our four public shipyards, the budget documents show that their workload exceeds the capacity by about 117 to 153%. These shipyards are losing a ton of marine welders who get trained up and quickly move on to better paying jobs. The average shipyard worker only takes home roughly $41,000 a year, but President Biden's budget calls for a salary raise of 5.2% for the public shipyard workers. For both of y'all, shipyards increasingly need to attract a sizable and skilled workforce. How can Congress help the Navy attract more skilled workers to public shipyards and retain them throughout their careers?
I'll share the perspective of private shipyards. Again, the public shipyards fall underneath different admirals than are represented here. But I think the argument is the same. One is building those pipelines to develop people, blue-collar labor that's interested in the kind of work we do in naval shipyards. One of the things we've seen very successful is building ecosystems around the shipyards. So, Congress working with state and local governments to aid in the development of ecosystems around shipyards really provides opportunity. If there's no housing in the area of a shipyard, you're going to have a hard time having blue-collar labor come in and be interested in a job there. Things like healthcare, things like daycare, things like housing are really important to have in the vicinities of the yards to attract the talent that we need to build the ships we need in the future.
And at all levels, I would just add, whether it's in your districts or at the state level, or in some cases at the federal level, such as the industrial base funds that have been appropriated, growing the workforce, making sure that young people understand it's an honorable and important profession to build ships or to repair ships for the U.S. Navy is, something that I think not just the Congress, but really at all levels of our country is something that we could stress and will pay dividends as we expand our capacity.
Thank you. It's interesting with the play catch-up, though. We have the largest military budget in the world, and shipyard workers are still making less than a livable wage. But we can responsibly and do it in a sustainable way to ensure that our military has the resources they need. Thank you for your service and testimony. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes my colleague from Texas, Representative Session.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you to being here today, and thank you for your service to our country. I'd like to focus, if I can, a conversation that I'd like for you to have with us about the classes of ships that are being built and the long-term, I don't know what the word is, return on investment or that help the fleet out. But seemingly there are problems with these ships. Maybe it's LCS, maybe it's some other types. Tell me about that. Are there requirements that are not standards are stuck to them, and all of a sudden some ships are okay and others aren't? Are we requiring more that is available by industry, and we're pushing that too far? Talk to me about the classes of ships and the reliability of those standards and the product delivered. Either one of you, gentlemen.
Well, yes, sir. I'll start, and Admiral Moton can join me in process. So there's multiple classes of ships, and those ships are built to a set of higher level requirements. What are the operational requirements? What are the mission requirements for the ship? In my opening statement, I talked about the destroyer program, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer program, a model for us in ship construction. That shipbuilding program has requirements for the ship to be a multi-mission surface combatant, air warfare, surface warfare, and anti-submarine warfare. In addition, it's gotten ballistic missile defense mission over time. The thing that makes the Arleigh Burke class special is that ship class now, 30 plus years in the making, we're building our 75th ship, I mentioned earlier, 75th ship, is that we've been able to evolve that ship over time to meet evolving requirements. We have flexibility in that hull. It's the longest standing program that we have in the Navy. Different programs are built to different standards. We made a decision, we talked earlier about another large surface combatant VDG 1000 program. We put a lot of technology in it in the beginning, and in the end it became very expensive, and we decreased the number of ships we were going to build from 32 to 3. And we have examples like that across the spectrum. Casey, you want to talk to the programs in your...
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I would just say, for each class, in terms of us as shipbuilders, the designs are tailored depending on the mission of the class, right? It's a carefully thought out process, and not all ships are the same, and certainly in the range, even though Admiral Anderson and I are not the nuclear shipbuilders, from the nuclear all the way down, we kind of tailor it to the mission and the need for the class. What doesn't change is that for each contract, the Navy and the shipbuilder are responsible for delivering us a ship that meet those requirements and meet those standards. And we work to ensure that we only accept ships when they meet those standards, and that we hold shipbuilders accountable to their contracts in delivering that.
Yes, sir, but the testimony is you went from what was projected 32 ships to 3. Someone needed a new pencil, right?
Yes, sir. Maybe I'll answer that question a little bit differently, maybe with LCS, if that's all right.
I'll let you give your own answer, Admiral. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You certainly did mention LCS, and absolutely, that class has had some reliability challenges in several areas. We have focused very hard on correcting those, making those ships reliable, providing the support that they need to do to the shipbuilders. As an acquisition shipbuilder, the quality issues are unacceptable, right? We have worked to fix them and have made significant progress on LCS, but they are unsuccessful or unacceptable in terms of the quality issues.
So would you say, sir, that they were oriented at not the design but the manufacturing?
Sir, there are many aspects of the LCS that cause the reliability. Some manufacturing, some equipment, some design. Quite frankly, it was significant in several areas. What I will assure you is that on the frigate design, which is kind of the successor to LCS and our frigates, those lessons learned have been applied. We made sure to start with mature systems, non-developmental systems. We are ensuring that the frigate is built to sort of core Navy quality standards in survivability and reliability. We leveraged existing designs to ensure that we did not have the developmental issues there. We made sure that we had a mature production before the ship started construction. I know many of those are kind of shipbuilding details, but those are the important lessons learned from LCS, an example that we're applying now, and I know that Admiral Anderson is doing that as well on the next destroyer.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like the record to reflect that as I started, I end. I want to thank these gentlemen for their service to the United States of America, a grateful nation, and I yield back my time, Chairman.
The gentleman yields. His time has expired. The chair recognizes my friend and colleague from North Carolina, Representative Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank our witnesses for their service to our country also. Rear Admiral, but I'm going to follow up with some more detail from what my colleague from Texas was asking you in a general way. Admiral Anderson, the Navy's discovered that the Freedom class littoral combat ship suffers from design flaw, which has led to repeated failures in the combining gear, which is part of the ship's propulsion system. Can you provide an estimate on how much it will cost to repair the combining gear issue, and when design flaws are discovered on ships that the Navy has accepted, who's on the hook for costs to fix the issue, the contractors or the taxpayers? And I want to say I have several questions, so I'd appreciate short answers.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to actually ask Admiral Moton to answer that.
Okay.
Boils
All
underneath
right.
his.
That's fine.
I have the LCS program, but
Okay.
yes, ma'am. So you are correct. The Freedom class in particular has had this design issue with the combining gear that you mentioned. I want to start by immediately telling you that a solution has been determined for that combining gear, and we are partway through the class of ships in installing that fix and restoring the ship to its full capability. That combining gear fix or combining gear issue again was unacceptable. It was a design issue in the gear that should never have been there. We have held industry accountable.
And who's paying for it? The industry is?
Ma'am, in our shipbuilding contracts in general, we share cost with industry, and that's not specific to LCS. That's how we do it. It's fixed price incentive contracting, and that's how it's working on LCS, is that we are sharing the cost. However, typically once a ship delivers, we don't have the ability to do that. In this case, for LCS, we declared what's called a latent defect, and I apologize for the term, but it's a contractual mechanism where we hold the building yard accountable for the mistake that they made. We still share the cost, but it's certainly not the U.S. Navy or the taxpayer paying 100%. And so that's the way that...
What percent are we paying? Let's be specific.
On the LCS contract, ma'am, it's a 50-50 cost share. So
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It's also been reported that the LCS requires preventive maintenance by contractors about once a month for a 1 to 2 week period. I mean, this means half of the time the ship is not available for use. It's absurd to think that a ship that costs north of $500 million could be in preventive maintenance cycle for up to 6 months a year. I know you've said that you found the solution and you're working on it, but will the repairs that have been needed and maintenance now go away?
Ma'am, any ship, of course, requires preventive maintenance. That's the way that we keep the availability, the time that the ships are available up. For the LCS program utilized a construct that's different than much of the rest of our surface force originally, which was to keep a small crew and to have industry repair those ships. Certainly, we have had some challenges there. We've made changes. The Navy sailors are now doing more and more of that maintenance in order to keep those ships more operable. We are also trying to reduce, you mentioned preventive maintenance, but corrective maintenance, right? We are implementing reliability fixes to the class to reduce the number of equipment failures they have and to provide the fleet that the ships need. And certainly there is more work to go, but there are 4 LCSs currently deployed today in the U.S. 7th Fleet and several more elsewhere in the world. So we are making progress, but as the shipbuilder, I'm the first to say there's more to do.
Okay, one more question. Based on the Navy's experience with the LCS, would it be beneficial to the service to procure multiple ship variants produced by different contractors in the future, or would it be a hindrance? It seems to me having all our eggs in one basket has not been very productive.
So it's obviously different for each class. LCS was a sort of a unique construct where we ended up with our 2 different variants that basically meet the same requirement. We have other cases, and in some cases where our production rate supports it, DDG 51 under Admiral Anderson's portfolio, where we have 2 shipyards building DDG 51. So where it's possible, it's helpful to have multiple ships. It kind of depends on every ship class and what our build rate is.
Well, thank you very much. Again, thank you for your service. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. The chair recognizes my colleague, Representative Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to wave onto this hearing today. This subcommittee is conducting extremely important work, and I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the conversation. What I want to know is, are the Chinese weakening our Navy and Coast Guard from within? In 2016, a family-owned shipyard in my district was awarded a U.S. Coast Guard Phase 1 contract for the first 4 of 25 offshore patrol cutters. These cutters are being completed on time and on budget, despite Hurricane Michael's Category 5 devastation in our region. The Coast Guard has repeatedly stated that the quality of these ships was as good or better than any they had. Despite this success, the Coast Guard awarded the OPC Stage 2 contract to another company, Austal USA, which is the largest shipbuilding contract ever awarded by the Coast Guard at $3.3 billion. This is the same Austal that was awarded the contract to build the littoral combat ships for the Navy. As widely reported, these ships are plagued by cracked hulls, broken equipment, and technologies that don't work. They are severely delayed and they suffer massive cost overruns. Despite these complete failures, DoD announced a grant of $50 million using taxpayer money to Austal so they'd be eligible to bid on the Coast Guard contract. You would think that the U.S. Navy would be hesitant to award another contract to a company that delivered faulty products. But Austal was also awarded a contract to design and build the Navy's expeditionary fast transport ships, also a failure. Most recently, Austal was awarded the contract to build the command and control modules for the nuclear-powered submarines that are central to our nuclear defense triad. All this, and now Austal's CEO and other C-suite executives have been indicted for fraud by the Department of Justice. In what universe does this happen? Austal USA is part of Austal International, an Australian company with close China links. In fact, Austal co-owned a shipyard in China until December of 2021. The entire time it was building ships for the United States Navy. It should alarm everyone that a company like Austal, that has won multiple defense and homeland security contracts, has such close ties to the CCP. This is a deeply troubling national security threat. Admiral Anderson, the Chief of Naval Operations, on multiple occasions, has stated that China is the strategic threat to this country, and the time to act is now. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Thank you. I do too. Given your position, what prime contractors for the Navy have had direct partnerships with the CCP over the last 5 years? Admiral Anderson.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm making sure I understand your question. Which prime shipbuilding contractors that do work for the United States have direct contact?
With the Navy, are also working with the CCP. Let me help you.
None.
I'll reclaim my time. Mr. Chairman, I want to submit to the record an article from Baird Maritime titled, "Zhanglong Shipbuilding Wins China Coast Guard Vessel Tender."
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral Anderson, should prime contractors for the Navy or their subsidiaries have direct relationships with a country that your CNO believes poses the greatest threat to our nation's sovereignty and security?
No.
I agree. Thank you. Admiral Anderson, did the Navy provide a $50 million defense production grant, a grant funded by taxpayer dollars, to a company that had an active partnership with the CCP?
I can't answer the question on active partnership. I'm not aware of any active partnership with the CCP.
Admiral, let me jog your memory.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record a DoD press release announcing a $50 million Defense Production Act Title III grant with Austal USA. That's a nice gift. Mr. Chair?
So ordered.
Thank you. Admiral Anderson, do you believe it is responsible and sensible to award contracts to a company whose entire leadership structure was actively being investigated by the Department of Justice and the SEC for defrauding our government, by the way, have since been indicted? Is that reasonable?
No.
I agree, it's not. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record a DOJ press release titled, "3 Men Indicted for Multi-Million-Dollar Accounting Fraud Scheme at a U.S. Navy shipbuilder. And I think we can all guess who that shipbuilder is. Admiral, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate it.
So
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay. In closing, I'd like to thank our witnesses once again for their important and insightful testimony. With that, without objection, all members, first of all, I'd like to yield to Congressman Garcia for your closing comments.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to just correct one thing that was mentioned earlier and then just give a couple of general closing thoughts. I just want to I think, remind the subcommittee, and I think it's important for the public to remember, when we're talking about the capacity and the ability of the American shipbuilding to Chinese shipbuilding, no one certainly is going to argue that we don't have the best workforce and that we don't have the best military anywhere in the world. But the capacity and our ability to build ships is dramatically different. And I just want to remind us that in China, they build on the commercial side approximately 1,000 ships a year. The United States builds approximately 10 ships a year. We build 1% of China's shipbuilding capacity. Globally, 47% of all ships produced are made in China. Globally, 0.2% of the ships produced are made in the United States. And so, yes, our ships are better, our workers are better, but as far as who's building more ships and the capacity, there is no question that over many decades, that has shifted unfortunately, to China. Just want to also just close by thanking all of you for your service. I'm particularly just grateful, Admiral, and sir, that you had gone to Korea to look at their shipyard. And they are really doing some innovative work there, and I know that you're trying to implement some of what we have learned from some of our allies across the globe. And also, at a later time, I just want to also get into some conversation about 3D printing, which I know the printing of metals for submarines and what we're doing here in the United States is incredible. And I want to commend all the innovation that is happening in the Navy around 3D printing and what that's going to do to our shipbuilding capacity in the future, as well as within our workforce. And so thank you for doing that. Thank you for your interest in high-performing organizations, and I look forward to the Navy continuing that work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to appreciate all your time today. It's always frustrating when you're kind of limited to 5 minutes, but that's the way we do things in Congress. I want to remind everybody they have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. In particular, areas that I wish we would have got into a little bit more is maybe some of the labor laws or labor requirements, and see the degree to which that maybe slows things down or affects something, as well as hope to give you some questions regarding the degree to which you feel that we are dependent on parts from other countries and the degree to which that is a potential problem in the future. But in any event, if there's no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.